Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Underground Debate. Please welcome your moderator, Mr. Colin Quinn.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Colin Quinn. A lot of you know me as a comedian, but I think we all know I'm so much more than that, too. But yeah, these are real glasses. It's not affectation. I need reading glasses. I know you're like, oh, he thinks he's smart now. He has glasses. Don't start shit with me tonight, folks. This is serious stuff. The country, the United States. It's about is it declining or is it not declining? Is it great? Was it ever great? These are the big questions these people are going to answer for you tonight. I mean, and let's face it, our country could not be more divided at this point. You know, the left, the right, the center. I mean, you know, little kids are on leashes while pit bulls roam the streets freely. And women box while men are getting waxed. Children learn how to fight in school, how to read in jail. We send all our jobs overseas while people come over here from overseas looking for jobs, you know. A lot of contradictions is what I'm saying. Well, the good thing about the debate, no one's going to mention the Kardashians. I'll get it out of the way. Since you talk about the decline, people always bring up the Kardashians. Maybe somebody is, I'm sorry. Yeah, so basically the rules are, if I hear any booing, there's going to be a problem. Now, I'm used to it personally, but I'm just saying when people are giving their opinions, try not to boo, because that's part of the problem. See? A little Irish shaming for you to stop you from booing. That's how we do it in the old country. Bay Ridge and Rockaway. All right. Yeah, so basically we're going to start off with opening statements about is the country great, and everyone has their opinion, and we'll take it from there. It should be a rollicking time. And if it's not, you know what I mean? What are you going to do at this point? Go across the street and watch 12 ex-convicts play fucking half court? I still got it. All right, look. No, the point is, you watch ex-convicts play chess in Washington Square Park. All right. We're going to start off with opening statements. The first opening statement is going to be by David Rothkopf, the CEO and editor of the FP Group. David, would you like to start? Is America great or yay or nay?
I'm over here.
I know that. Sorry, the glasses.
Yes, the fake. There are no lenses in those glasses.
No, they're not.
Well, I'm going to take the position that America is great. There are several reasons I'm going to do it. One is that Donald Trump has taken the other position, and therefore these guys have to defend the Trump position. I just want to begin by asking whether they're anti-women and anti-immigrant as well.
Well, we challenge your contention of the debate parameters. So
yeah, exactly.
Guys, wait, let me. This is the opening statement. You're not supposed to answer, and you're not supposed to ask. That wasn't rhetorical enough, you know?
Okay, let me try this more rhetorically.
Yes.
Are you really anti-women and anti? No. Okay. All right. I'll give you a few things that are what we call in Washington facts, and I'll leave you to figure out what those are. But America at this moment is the richest country in the world, more direct capital investment in the United States than any other country. Those immigrants that Donald Trump doesn't like come to the United States more than they come to any other country, 1.3 million a year. We are the only country in the world that has the ability to project power anywhere from space, from the air, from the sea, from the land. And we spend 10 times as much on defense spend. I'm not saying this is a strength, but it's just a fact, than any other country on Earth. We lead the world in terms of graduate education, university education. Every ranking, top 10 universities, top 50, the top 100 is dominated by Americans. The top 10 companies in the world are American companies. The companies that are inventing the future of the world, whether it's Facebook or Google or Yahoo or the startups in Silicon Valley or in Route 128, are American companies. We have a tiny fraction of the world's population, but we dominate as a percentage of GDP. So we have about 4.5% of the world's population, but about 25% of the world's GDP. And, you know, the premise here is, are we in decline or getting better? So we could be all those things, and if any of them were going down, then we would be in decline by definition. But none of them are going down. Other countries may be gaining a little bit, but no country is in a position to challenge us, nor will they be for a long, long time. China has an average per capita income of $7,000 a year. Our people have an average per capita income of $56,000 a year. We have vastly more capital resources, technological resources, educational resources, infrastructure resources than any other country on the planet. And as a consequence, I'm not even sure how this is going to turn into a debate. Because there is no statistical basis, no factual basis, no historical basis on which you can say the United States is in decline.
Whoa, that's quite a bold statement there. Well, he's off to the races. One fact check, China, 7,000, America, 56,000. Chinese in America, 80,000 a year, average. All right. We are next going to staff writer for The New Yorker and seven-time author, George Packer. George, what do you say?
I wrote out a very short opening statement. Historically, we are declining relative to other powers. Clearly, something big is changing, the global economy. Domestically, inequality is growing, social mobility is declining, median wages are falling, and core industries like manufacturing are shrinking. That was said by David Rothkopf a couple of years ago, so I think the way this is going to become a debate is you're going to have to debate yourself, David.
I welcome the opportunity. I welcome the opportunity, and if all of you would like to leave, I will continue.
It'll raise the IQ of the debate considerably, I promise you. Donald Trump did not take our position. Donald Trump is our position. We are in decline, and the first instance is Donald Trump. So don't put him on us. He's on himself, and he's going to be the Republican nominee. He may well be the next president of the United States. He may well be. And if that's the case, I don't think we need to go into a whole lot of statistics to prove that something has gone wrong. Let's just say something has gone wrong in the last 30, 40 years. So what has gone wrong? David's statistics are impressive, but you could adduce a whole different set of statistics to prove that things are in decline in this country and have been, in my view, basically since I graduated from high school. That was the peak, 1978. It's been all downhill since
That was
then.
my peak, too.
Yep. It is for a lot of us. What's changed since then? Well, income inequality has grown astronomically since the late 70s. We had a country in which the top 1% owned, more or less?
Speaking of Mike.
The mic is kind of oddly placed, but I will try to speak into the mic. The top 1% had 10% of the country's pre-tax income in the late 70s, 1980. Now it's over 20%. It's doubled. We know these statistics. The top 0.1% has gone from 3% to 10%. And all of this has accelerated, not declined, not slowed down since the Great Recession. The top 1% has gained 91% of the income growth since the Great Recession. That means 99% of the country has gained 9% of the income growth. And I could go on and on, but income inequality, which has been the basis, obviously, for Bernie Sanders' campaign, has grown so lopsided that even Republicans have had to take it on as a serious issue and have found some of the usual villains to hold responsible for it, but they admit that it's true, which they didn't 10 years ago. Problem after chronic problem has gone unresolved, unaddressed by our political system in the last generation, from global warming to income inequality, to infrastructure decay, to falling educational standards. By a recent study, 22% of our high school students are college ready. We are last of wealthy countries in numeracy, last in problem solving, and second to last in literacy, according to a recent study by the OECD. So in terms of education, what one education writer called an across-the-board collapse in education standards has taken place in the last 30 or 40 years. And that's a huge problem, not just for families and for individuals, but for our economy. I could go on. There are other problems. Political polarization may be sort of part of the heart of the matter. That has also become an intractable and just sort of a permanent feature of our political landscape, and we don't seem to be able to break out of it. Year after year, it gets worse. If you took a chart of the following trends: income inequality, political polarization as measured by voting patterns in Congress, deindustrialization, corporate money going into political campaigns, you would have a line that is pretty much the same line for each of those. It would be a single thick black line, and it would all be going up. And that's not improvement, that's decline in those categories. So I'm sure we'll be able to get into the details later on, but to me, Donald Trump is my best example for why America's in decline.
Thanks, but that's the small stuff. What do you think about the big picture? We're doing well as a country? I'm being sarcastic, folks, of course. All right, let's move on. People are serious, or I stink. All right, the columnist for the National Review, panelist on the McLaughlin Group, Tom Rogan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Opening statement.
Yeah.
Opening salvo.
Well, first I want to say it's great to be here, and thank you very much for everyone for coming, regardless of your political views. I think it's a testament, we could all say, that America is still great, although we would contend that it is declining.
Close to the mic, please. Sorry, Tom.
Sorry, yeah. So I want to take off a couple of points that David mentioned. We're talking about the notion of American power in the world. If you look at what's happening in two specific cases, in the Middle East and in the South China Sea. In the South China Sea, you see a very similar situation to the 1930s, with the rise of an imperial empire militarizing a vast swathe of the ocean. And that matters to all of us, I would contend, because the amount of trade that passes through those waters is highly significant to the global economy, highly significant to all of us in terms of the purchasing power that we have and the costs that we incur. But China has that because the United States has not practically manifested our power in terms of doing things. Do we have the world's most powerful, capable, skilled military? Yes, we do. But we are not practically deterring adversaries. And in their perception of our weakness, our decline, their power can grow, and it is growing. Another example would be the Middle East, where, of course, the Bush administration made many mistakes. But if you look at the situation now, where the power dynamics are spiraling out of control, Saudi Arabia and Iran reverting to sectarianism, violence through that, how does that affect us? Well, it affects us in terms of the political center being eviscerated in its place, groups like Daesh or ISIS coming into play. And again, it's a manifestation of American decline in the sense where the United States as recent as 2011 had real power in Iraq in terms of political dynamics. It's not there anymore. We haven't practically. Power has to be manifested into action as well as in capability and statistics. And on the domestic front as well, I would say the best example of why our country is in decline is the trending data from the Congressional Budget Office in terms of the entitlement problem we face. Anyone in this room who is under 40 should be very concerned about the fiscal state of the nation. And this becomes decline because, frankly, those investments, those reforms to keep entitlement something that the poorest among us can rely upon when we come to take that, are not going to exist without reform. And why does the failure to resolve that, and we talk, George talking about the political deadlock, that's a representation of decline in the sense that people are moving to, they don't trust the system. And that expression, there cannot be any better example of decline in the sense that a manifest percentage of the American people, whether it be Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump, are reverting to extremes rather than the political center in terms of trying to work through things. We don't trust each other as much as we did. We don't trust our country as much as we did. And that, I would say, in the world's greatest democracy, is a pretty critical problem.
Thank you. And by the way, that's a real accent because you see he's already finished his beer.
Oh, well, I would...
Give the
well, actually, in the UK, this is an interesting anecdote. This is known as, I was telling George, this is known as a wife-beating beer. It's seen as like a beer that is very low class, and here it's a high-class beer and premium. So trade renders itself in different ways in different locations.
Tom, you've gone too far. Bring him another beer, obviously. He's cut off after that. Okay, now we're going to hear from author and columnist of the National Review and the Washington Times, Kristin Tate. Kristin?
Well, thank you so much for having me. You guys are real downers, okay? But before I start, I want to have everyone think about a question. If you were born today, if your children were born today, which country in the world would you want them to be born in? Now, we all know the answer. It's the United States of America. My opponents, if they're smart, they're probably going to tell you that other countries are doing better than us, that other countries are on the incline. But let's think about the countries that they'll probably mention. China. Even if you spoke Mandarin, would you want to be born in China today? The answer is no. You would want to be born in the U.S. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that America's number one. I mean, we have problems. We can be quite flawed sometimes. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, will our children, will our grandchildren live better lives than we lived? The answer is obviously yes. They will grow up in a globalized society with a much better quality of life than we could have ever imagined. So there are a few questions that I want you to keep in mind as we go through this debate. One is, are we more free? Are we living better and longer? Are we smarter? And are we richer? And the answer to all of those questions is absolutely yes. Let's take the first question. Are we more free? Well, the very fact that we can have this debate here in America really says something about how free we are. Because there are a lot of other countries where you can't even criticize your own government. So the fact that we're sitting here having a debate about whether or not the country is in decline truly speaks to how free we are. Let's say we were having this debate in Dubai. It's a great city in the Middle East. But as soon as I, as a woman, leave Dubai, I can't drive a car. I can't vote. I would have to wear a black Halloween costume from head to toe as a woman. So I like living in a country where I, as a woman, have the same rights as men. And it wasn't too long ago that, 100 years ago, women couldn't vote. 50 years ago, African Americans couldn't vote in this country. But we're continually making progress to make the U.S. more free. We live in a society now where anyone can marry who they want. You can practice the religion that you want to practice. You can criticize your own government. These are all signs of a free, thriving nation. So now let's ask, are we living better, and are we living better and longer? Yes. Over the last 50 years, our lifespan has increased 10 years, and that's not all that's happening, though. In Silicon Valley, let me tell you what they're developing there. Scientists are actually developing nanocells, and these nanocells will go into your body and they will find damaged cells, aging cells, and cancerous cells. They will go in and actually reverse that process. This is the kind of technology that's coming out of the US, and this will make us live longer. Some scientists say that we will live up to 50 years longer because of this technology, and this is not just something the rich will have access to. Americans from all walks of life will have this. If you work hard, you will be able to have this. I mean, we are already living longer than we want to live. If you go into the nursing homes throughout this country, I mean, the old people there, they've seen World War I, they've seen World War II. They are ready to die. So we're living long lives already. And during our long lifespans, our quality of life is pretty good. I mean, we can wake up in the morning, we can go into our kitchen and make a frappuccino on our Keurig machine, get your smartphone, you can get the weather and the news with a few taps of your finger. I mean, think about these luxuries. And right now, this debate is being streamed live. There's probably some fat kid in Iowa who's sitting in his pajamas in bed watching this debate. He's probably watching it on his $300 computer, his highly affordable computer, because we're in America, we have that luxury, eating a bag of Doritos and texting his girlfriend that he met online. That's great. This is the way we can live life. Even the way we find love in this country is great. You can meet people online. My dad met a Brazilian woman online that he never would have met if it weren't for the fantastic technology that we have right here in America. They're in love. They're engaged now. So this is the digital revolution bringing us into a new age. Even the leisure. This is not just about the necessities. Think about the leisures we have in America. What did your parents do for vacation 30 years ago? Maybe they went to the water park or the lake in their state. Now, if you want to spend a couple $1,000, you can travel the world. You can travel the world multiple times a year. Airfare, transportation, it's all cheaper and it's all more accessible to us now than ever. We have the world at our fingertips. And now I want to ask the last and probably most important question, which is, are we smarter? Well, today, being smart is not about memorizing facts or statistics. It's about having access to facts and statistics. Everyone in this room has a smartphone in their pocket. We have access to more information, the average American does, than the President of the United States had access to 1 or 2 decades ago. That is power. And a lot of people in other countries can't even, they can't afford things like this, but we all have it. Even people who are struggling in America now have smartphones. So this kind of accessibility to technology, it levels the playing field between all Americans. It's not just the elites that have information anymore, and it makes us more informed citizens. We can fact-check politicians during the election season. We can call out the jokers. This is what Americans are able to do now. So here's the bottom line. America is not perfect. It can be pretty flawed. I'm not going to argue with that. But you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, would you want to live in any other country? Can you find love in this country? Can you make it up socially in this country if you make an effort? Can you get a job? Can you live in a house with everything you need? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristin. And apologies to the fat, lonely kid in Iowa that's sitting there right now going, why are they watching me? And full disclosure, we are also, one of our sponsors is BrazilianWomen.com. So that wasn't accidental. All right, look. Listen. Aside from, well, let's start with the presidential election. Does that mean, does that mean we're in decline or not in decline? Because everybody's like, oh, Trump, we're in decline. But the other side of it is, it's supposed to be the will of the people. Not that it was supposed to be a democracy, but it is a democracy now. But, so I'm saying, do you guys feel that Trump being, the people, for better or for worse, love Trump? A lot of people love him. So doesn't that mean we're still keeping to our original traditions?
Well, let's look at it a different way. First of all, Donald Trump's only gotten 10 million votes so far. There's 360 million Americans. He's only gotten 40% of the Republican vote. He's got a lower approval rating than head lice, the DMV, and root canal surgery, according to a poll that came out last week. What does that mean? It means Donald Trump is going to lose the election. Okay? Now, I know we're depressed because Donald Trump is out there. But think about this. 50 years from now, when people look back at this period in American history, they're going to say, in 2008, despite a history of racial intolerance, the United States elected the first black man president. And that in 2016, despite 240 years of sexism and putting women down, the United States elected its first woman president. And that in fact, between 2008 and 2016, the American electorate demonstrated the greatest vision and progressiveness of any time in its history. So that doesn't sound like decline to me.
Right. But anybody else want to care to say that the other side of the Trump thing, as far as, because I'm just saying it's easy to say, oh yeah, Trump, but I'm just saying, is there something positive about the 10 million people giving their opinion? Whether people agree with it or not, it's still 10 million people that feel that way.
I mean, they all have smartphones, and they don't seem to care that he contradicts himself every day and that they can look up every falsehood he utters, and it doesn't seem to have an impact. So I think the access to information is a wonderful thing, except that it doesn't seem to change people's thinking all that much. In fact, at times it seems to make it worse. And that poor fat kid in Iowa is going to be socially bullied into suicide on Twitter.
Let's be clear,
He's hypothetical.
no one is going to leave here tonight remembering anything other than this fat kid in Iowa.
But I mean, David, are you not a little disturbed that of our two parties, one of them is on the threshold of nominating a guy who went from being a tabloid bore to a joke to a slightly worrying speck on the horizon to an outrage to a guy that lots of Republicans are slowly rationalizing their way to accepting? Does that not worry you a little?
There is nothing redeeming about America even contemplating electing a racist misogynist who is incompetent to the office. So, I mean, we can reach all we want around it. The question is Donald Trump a sign of the net decline of the country. And he's not. He's a sign of a flaw within the country. We're a country with a lot of flaws, but we're set apart from every other country in the world, and that the one thing we do better than all of them is acknowledge our flaws and reinvent ourselves. We responded to the last economic crisis faster than the others and recovered better than the others. We have a constitution that's designed to reinvent itself when it's wrong. And at the end of the day, we're going to look back and we're going to see this dark blot on American democracy, which is the presence of this nincompoop. And we are going to elect Hillary Clinton, who's going to be the most competent candidate to be elected president of the United States in the last 25 years.
And the most corrupt, probably. But here's a contention. Well,
Hey, what did I say about blue?
yeah. All right. But here's a problem. If we think, why does I don't like Donald Trump. National Review, where I write, doesn't like Donald Trump. He's not a conservative. He doesn't represent the values of the country. But he does represent anger in the country. And again, what it comes down to here, if you look around this room, listen to my accent. My father was in the State Department. I'm American, but I have a British accent. But you look around the room, the diversity of this country comes from the notion of this country, our national motto, e pluribus unum, out of many one. But today, those divorces between us, again, Sanders and Trump representing those extremes, the degree to which people do not want to engage with each other, that represents a perishing of the American psyche. And is it resolvable? Absolutely. Is this the greatest nation in the world? Absolutely. But there is a decline, and it's real, and it's tangible, and it's measured in those human interactions that define our social discourse and the nature of our country.
Look, Colin, I actually don't think that the rise of Donald Trump signifies our decline. I think it signifies an upswing in this country. Technology and the internet have allowed all Americans to hold our politicians accountable. Everyone knows what their senators are voting on. We all know where everyone stands on the issues at this point. The American people are fed up with what's going on in Washington, D.C., and they want change. And I think that the fact that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders both have such rabid support behind them show that the people are more engaged in politics than ever. This shows that America is on the upswing. We're not just going to sit back and, let the insiders decide elections anymore. This shows that Americans are engaged, they want change, but they're also very tapped into the issues.
But don't you, by the way, this is a fantastic debate. I'm doing sensational. Tremendous crowd. Everyone's doing great.
You sound just like Trump, actually. Yeah.
I know, but what I'm saying is this, guys. Even right now, you can feel like the anger. Like this is how the whole country feels to me. Maybe I'm nuts, but I feel like it's going to be a long, hot summer because people really are very. Everybody on both sides, and social media has exacerbated it, wants to force other people to believe what they believe. And that's not the way it felt like it used to be. It felt like it, but it wasn't quite as,
But that's
extreme.
because there's more engagement, and that's a fantastic thing.
I don't think it's a fantastic thing sometimes. You know what I mean? I know it is more engagement, but sometimes I think
People
that's going
care
to
about
lead to an
what's going
apocalyptic event in the next 6 months.
People care about what's going on.
Yeah.
Average Americans can have their voices heard in ways that they
Right.
never could. Look at me. I was a nobody from New Hampshire. I started a blog on the internet.
Right.
And within a few years, I had thousands and thousands of readers. This is
Right.
what we can do today. Average
Sure.
Americans can influence the political environment.
Right. Ideally, that's how it was supposed to work. I'm just saying in the long run, even the founding fathers were like, no, it should be a republic, not necessarily democracy. So I'm just saying,
Well,
no
but
offense
also,
to you
look,
folks. I'm
but
just
listen-
saying,
But listen, even the founding fathers were going through exactly this stuff, right? Alexander Hamilton was spreading rumors about who Thomas Jefferson was sleeping with. Thomas Jefferson was spreading rumors about how Alexander Hamilton was sleeping with. In the 19th century, people would have cane fights on the floor of the United States Congress. Politics has always been dirty and ugly and lowbrow, and it is still dirty and ugly and lowbrow. But the question is not this noise that dominates day-to-day headlines. The question is, what's the long-term trend? And how does it, result in, U.S. power, U.S. opportunities, U.S. growth? And right now what you're seeing is the United States reinventing itself at a moment of technological transformation, going through the growing pains associated with that, but on the verge of leading into the 21st century, just as it led through the 20th century.
There's a lot of truth to what both of you say, so let's try to move toward the center here for a moment. I mean, Nespresso is wonderful, Lipitor is wonderful, Amazon Prime is wonderful, unless you're a writer of books like me. There are many things that I would say are more smartphones. The iPhone 6, I don't own one. I'm sure it's wonderful. I'm sure it can do things that I'll never figure out. On the surface of life, there is this sheen of efficiency and seamlessness, as they say out in Silicon Valley, that makes life seem full of wonder and promise and ease, and it frees us up to stare at our phones all day, which is apparently what we really want to be doing with our time. Underneath that, there are these institutions that we need and that are essential to a democracy. Government, banks, corporations, the media, schools, I could go on and on. Every one of them has some form, I think, of clogged arteries or of a kind of worn out circulatory system so that they just cannot produce the results that benefit the majority of us. We do have a very successful minority. A lot of them are in New York City. A lot of them are on the West Coast. A lot of them are in the innovative cities of the interior. But as soon as you leave those places and wander around Rockingham County, North Carolina, or Youngstown, Ohio, you find out that actually there's no local paper anymore, or the local paper that exists has become fish wrapping because there's no longer any financial support for it. You find that the schools are producing 12th graders reading at 6th grade levels. You find that the jobs are all in Mexico or in China. You find that the houses are in foreclosure and the money is going to Wall Street. And you find that the local congressman is an entrenched, gerrymandered hack who cannot be ousted because the parties have figured out how to rig that system. So let's leave the West Village for a moment and look at the rest of the country. And in fact, there is a kind of fundamental problem with our institutions that is keeping us from reinventing ourselves, except at a very thin level at the top of our society.
Yeah, but I don't know if that stands up to scrutiny. So, I mean, yes, inequality is terrible in the United States and needs to be addressed. Yes, 50% of minority students in inner cities in the United States don't graduate high school, and therefore are going to be economically left out throughout their lives, creating a social crisis for America. And that is a serious cultural flaw, a civilizational flaw. It's not just a statistic. Yes, we haven't been keeping up with wage growth since the 70s in the United States. And I could make a list of issues that we've got to solve, because every country at every time in its history has a to-do list. But the institutions of the United States of America have undergone a change, because at the founding of the United States of America, one of the institutions was slavery. And during the growth of the United States during the 19th century, one of the institutional tools of the United States was genocide against the Native Americans who lived in this country. And it wasn't until the 20s that the majority population in this country could vote. And the majority population in this country has never had a woman in the highest position in the country. The institutions of the country kept out minorities in universities in a way that they no longer do today. Today, the average life expectancy of an American male was 46 years in 1900, which means that a couple of us wouldn't be on this panel. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you and me.
It might be more fun without us, Dave.
Yeah, right. But we now live longer. More go to college. New companies are being created here faster. Patents are being created here and turned into businesses at a faster rate. The engine of reinvention is healthier in the United States than it is in any other country. In fact, I would argue that perhaps the thing the United States does better than any other country is allow people to fail.
But David, if that's true, why has social mobility, which used to be the justification for our Wild West capitalism. Yeah, you may well fall very far, but you then can rise again. Social mobility in this country has been falling, and we have half the level of Germany. We can no longer say we're more wide open and have more opportunity than Europe. That's no longer true. We're actually stuck in the class we're born into. Why is
so
that?
Not true. In this country, there
That's
is no
statistically
excuse to not have a paying job. There's no excuse to
That's
not
just
move up
ideology,
if you are a hard
Christian.
worker. It's
What's
not
your problem?
ideology.
I told you people.
are free to make bad choices in this country, fail, and then try again. That's part of the American dream, and it's good for the rest of us because we can observe their failures and learn from them. And I just want to point out there are lots of pathways to success in this country that are not just the traditional pathways to success. I have plenty of friends who never went to college. Maybe they went to trade school. You can make, I have a friend who makes 6 figures as an underwater welder. He didn't go to college. He didn't even finish high school. There are pathways to success. You just have to be willing to work hard for it. I mean, if you go to college and you major in something that there's no demand for it, like art history perhaps, or gender studies, you might not get a job. But you can then go to a trade school. You can learn other skills. You need to equip yourself with the skills that our new economy demands.
I'm
That is part of
I'm
America,
afraid I have
the
to volunteer.
ability
Wait, don't
to
filibuster.
reinvent yourself, to fail, to try again, to learn a new skill. That's what America's all about.
I'm afraid I'm going to immigrate to the other panel in a second. I have to disavow all of that. But
But isn't
Kristen,
this
I'm
the
afraid
problem
that's a great example of access to information not necessarily leading to more understanding of the way things are.
What is?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Let's not try to just attack her, although you can make an art history crack. We're on the NYU campus right now, okay? Gotta be careful. But I'm saying, even this little bit fight where, everybody's attacking her, isn't that part of what? That's like symbolic. That's the way the country is right now. It's like a metaphor, a microcosm, I should have said. But, I'm a comedian. I don't do this before. It's my first debate. But don't you see what I'm saying? Immediately people just take and try to attack other people.
And they do. And look, and it is a problem because, I know Kristin. Kristin is much younger than the rest of us, but probably the most successful business person at this table of her own merits. And that is a Googleable thing that you can verify. And that matters in this country because the great thing about this country traditionally has been that notion of personal responsibility and striving. And I would say, when we talk about university, we talk about college education, it's the rising cost of tuition. Well, you know what? The hard truth is too many people, and it's a reason for the decline, too many people in this country go to college. And it's unfair because the tax system reinforces that notion that people who should not necessarily be going to college should go to college. And the guy out in Iowa, the fat boy 10 years from now, has to pay his taxes for that. What we should do, and I think Germany is a good example, it's imperfect, but a way that we could reverse some of this decline, some of the loss of jobs that we've seen to China and Mexico, that is painful and is real and is a key driving force for Donald Trump. What can we do to resolve that? Well, we should have a discussion in this country in terms of the merits of someone going to a technical school in an apprenticeship system, earning the skills to be able to be employed at a relatively low wage early on, but then being able to set up a business. And we don't do that. We have this social stigma that if you don't go to college, you are somehow inferior. And it's real. And it's pathetic.
That would be true, except for the fact that this president of the United States actually has put more focus on people being able to go to and benefit from attending community college than any president in American history.
And what's our productivity level under this president?
Our productivity level has struggled since we came out of a crisis, but we're actually gaining faster than any other developed country in the world, have more direct foreign investment than any other developed country in the world, are leading the way with the technologies of tomorrow in a way that no other country in the world is going. I am coming at this from the perspective of the liberal democratic perspective of optimism. I see problems. I just see the mechanisms in the United States for solving those problems. And I don't think it's an accident that the Republican candidate right now, Donald Trump, is coming at it from the perspective of attacking America and saying that it's down and that he's going to bring it up. And the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, is coming from the perspective of saying America's already great and we have the tools to make it greater.
But I would say, as a final extension, I think the best example of why we have to be very careful about the notion of slandering Trump supporters. I mean, I think the man is an intellectual cretin and a moral. He's anyway. But one of the things that is very noticeable in terms of statistics is that Donald Trump has a lot of support from young men and women who have served in the military, and in many cases served deployments, very tough environments abroad, and they feel disconnected from the country. And I would just say, as an example, again, access to information, why that matters. Google EFP and Google what happens, what some of these people have seen. And if I would say the country is in decline, if those people at a statistically significant level, and it is a statistically significant level, feel that they've lost so much optimism that they retrench to the archon of fear and hate and anger, which is Donald Trump. And that matters. That psyche matters. Again, it comes back to that notion of national unity. And it's real and it's tangible. My grandfather didn't serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, but you talk to him, that anger manifestation of people who love their country deeply, it should concern us all. And I think it's a grave error. It only fuels Trump, in fact, where we attempt to push it aside. Yes, slam Trump, but also I think we have to, engage with those people. We have to, and the communities that you talked about.
Pain
George.
exists in the body so that we know where we have a problem and begin to fix it. Pain exists in the body politic so we know where we have a problem and we know where we have to go and fix it. This democratic process has produced an outpouring of pain from people who have real fears. You're absolutely right, they shouldn't be denigrated, but we have brought their fears to the forefront. They're not going to win. They're the people who are trying to exploit it for racist or other purposes are not going to win, but we're never going to get away from it. This election's going to end. Donald Trump's going to go back to reality television, but that 20% of the American electorate's going to be out there. We know better now that they're out there, and we're going to have to go and attend to their issues.
Right.
Yeah.
That's democracy, and that's why America
But
has the
Dave,
capability to reinvent itself unlike any other
No,
country
I
in the
mean,
world.
I like that, David, but let's look at American democracy and its capacity to do that. The Senate, you mentioned the Constitution. The Constitution gave us the Senate. The Senate gives us the Death Star of all good ideas. And it wasn't always thus. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the Senate and the Congress generally was a place of creativity. It's incredible to think of those two words together, Congress creativity. But when you think of all the legislation from the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, fair housing, clean air, clean water, campaign finance reform, on and on and on, that was a period of tremendous vibrancy and ferment in Congress. And in the last 30 years, what we've seen is the ancient precedents and rules of the Congress, of the Senate, that either were in the Constitution or kind of accreted like plaque on the institution over the decades following, have been used to prevent anything from being achieved. There was one exception, and that was Obamacare. And depending on where you stand, that was either the exception that proves the rule or the real exception. I think it was the real exception. It was the most important social legislation since the Great Society. Congress nearly died, to continue my metaphor, of a heart attack in order to pass it. And Obama had majorities in both houses. And that's because there is no longer a will, and I would say enough sense of responsibility on the part of our elected officials and our elites generally to put aside their narrow short-term gain, and this goes for Wall Street, it goes for all kinds of our institutions, in order to achieve a greater good. And instead we've got a black hole where nothing happens. And I'll be very surprised if under President Clinton or President Trump, the Senate suddenly rises from the dead and becomes the source of creative legislation that it once was.
Well, first of all, the odds are quite good that if Hillary Clinton wins this election, the Democrats will take back the Senate, and you'll see a different dynamic in that place. But the reality is that even with the dysfunction of the Senate, and even with, and you haven't gotten to this yet, but you should, the corrupt campaign finance system,
I think I mentioned
that has given a few rich people the ability to determine who our candidates are, even with developments like the Supreme Court and the Citizens United ruling, which is the worst Supreme Court ruling since the Dred Scott ruling, which compounds the corruption in the American system.
Why should your magazine or my magazine have a priority in terms of speech and not people outside the magazine?
Well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because speech is speech and money isn't speech. And if you say money, let me finish. If you say money is speech, that means people with more money have more speech. And that's not acceptable in the United States.
But what did the Citizens United ruling specifically say?
Look, I'm very happy to debate that with you in a moment. Because, you know, I'm always happy to debate anybody who will defend the indefensible. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that even with sclerosis in the Senate and a corrupt system, in the course of the past decade, we've seen progress for the LGBT community in the United States that was unprecedented, progress for women in politics that's unprecedented, progress in recovering from the last crisis that is better than in any other country in the world, the birth of businesses and areas of study with regard to nanotechnology and neuroscience, information technologies and so forth that are going to produce the new trends that lead the world, and the rebirth of American Rust Belt cities that we had left for dead, which means that the United States actually has the capacity to grow and evolve without the benefit of its dysfunctional Congress. And that is another sign of its strength and not a sign of its weakness.
Wait a minute, you're saying we'll have to leave our democracy behind in order to have a rebirth?
I'm saying that democracy has many branches and takes place on many levels in our society, and some of them are working.
But, you know, it's funny, we're divided by yes and no here, but we're also divided internally by left and right. So David and I ought to be on the same side.
And we
Kristin
are.
and Tom ought to be on the-
And you know we are.
And we are. But that's it bothers me that a liberal like myself would be willing to write off the national government in imagining a glorious future, because the national government has been time and again at least the guarantor of freedom and equality, if not the engine of it. And without that, it's very difficult for 1,000 points of light to illuminate all the skies. I think we need the government to work, and it doesn't work.
But okay, I agree with George that there is a problem. There is some problem in Washington with accountability. But isn't the very fact that candidates like Bernie Sanders and Trump are surging so much should tell you that the American people are waking up to that? Trump is a populist candidate. You might not like Trump, but the American people like Trump. And if the American people want someone like Trump as their president, that should tell you that the problem of accountability is being addressed. People are more tuned into what's going on, and they agree that, you know, there are problems with the Senate and with Congress not doing what they say they're going to do. And I think the people are more aware of that because of the phenomenal technology that allows us to all know what's going on at all times with our elected officials.
I mean, the way I'd put it is Trump is a terrible answer to a real problem.
Yeah, well, that brings me to I'll be stealing that in private conversations. I'll be like, you know, going so deep, I don't know.
And I'll be auditioning at the,
Wait a minute, Joe. Listen to me. Yeah, that brings me to the next question. Free speech. Obviously, no one can deny. It's under attack in this country, right? I mean, obviously, there's every year there's a new list of words that are supposedly code words or supposedly dog whistles, and it just whatever people decide it is. So, don't you think that part of the decline of America is, if there is a decline, I'm the moderator, but even if America is not in decline economically, whatever, ideologically, there's definitely a push to suppress people's speech. Does anyone have anything to say about that?
Is that true on Netflix?
Yeah, it is true on Netflix.
What can't you say on Netflix?
It's not about cursing. I'm just saying, as far as when people, you know, you're denying there's a bit
No,
of
I just want to goad you into saying one of those things.
The fact that we're sitting here talking about like safe spaces and trigger warnings and political correctness, which is what I'm sure you're talking about, the fact that that is one of our biggest problems in America shows you that we're actually doing pretty well. If we're talking about, oh, I'm offended because someone said something, that's a pretty small problem in the big scheme of things. So the fact that
That's
we're
why it's
sitting
called
here,
microaggression.
right. The fact that we're sitting here talking about trigger warnings and microaggressions as one of the big problems facing our nation kind of shows that we're not on the decline.
Well,
that's one of our biggest problems.
But one of the problems here, though, it's not just about the safe spaces debate, which is, it's just incredibly moronic. Actually, I think it shows that there's a real problem on college campuses. We need some more conservative professors, because way too many liberal professors on American college campuses tolerate that which is the antithesis of the Enlightenment, of liberalism, the expression of free ideas. They tolerate this in a pathetic cowardice to morons, essentially, who represent a minority of students.
I see you're taking the high road here.
Yeah, well, am I not correct? Am I not correct? But the problem here with speech...
Well, it could be that people who get a higher education don't end up being conservative.
Well, it could be. I suppose it could be that, but I would judge that it probably isn't. I think if you look at colleges, so what is the problem with speech in this country? It's the chilling of speech. And if you want to know where that leads and why that is a problem, that belief that a social dynamic, should I say that? Is that a problem? You should say whatever you want. The way that has two problems, number one, is that it makes people treat minorities in a way that they shouldn't be treated. They should be treated as equal, and you stand up to racists, but you don't treat... I have a black housemate, and frequently in Washington, he says it's amazing. He goes out, will meet white people, and they will treat him on tiptoes. And he says, I'm a human being, treat me normally. That's chilling. That's people taking a reading of a political correctness dynamic and imposing a weird sort of hybrid social dynamic through it. And the second point is, what is the great strength of the United States? Free, robust exchange of ideas. Trump and Bernie on the same stage, potentially. And where you don't see that, in Europe, for example, you see immense social tensions brewing, because those who are not allowed to speak, or those who, more importantly, feel they are not allowed to speak and thus do not speak, retrench into this notion of extremism, that they are crusaders against the orthodoxy, and they manifest that into more violent ways. And I would simply Google race riots Europe and look at that, and I would say the direct connection point is that. So we have to be maximal speech is positive speech.
I think to say that at a moment when for the first time in history every American has the ability to share their thoughts with every other American and most of the people in the world for no cost, where there are more media outlets, television outlets, radio outlets, podcast outlets, outlets on the internet of every sort, to suggest that at that particular moment we have a problem with free speech in the United States is ludicrous. To say that within the context of that moment there are some issues that still need to be resolved is just a weather report, okay? There are some issues that need to be resolved. We need to wake up and try to be fair in our clamor for openness. But more people have more ability to express themselves more fairly, to express themselves however they feel, than at any time in our history.
What do the people in the audience think, though? Do you think there is do you think there is a chilling of speech? Yes. Well, at least I have some people supporting me.
Tom, you should have gone to me for that. You made me look like a fool in my own fucking moderation. What do you people think?
Tom, on this one, I'm quite conservative.
I'm
quite conservative. I think you're right. There is a chilling of speech. It's called self-censorship. It's not coming from the government. It's not coming from the authorities. People are not being locked up for their stupid tweets. But there is self-censorship, and part of it is because of social media. Everyone lives, in my world, in the media, everyone lives in terror of the shaming of the mob that is going to come their way on social media if they say the wrong thing. And editors and writers and journalists are making decisions based on that anticipated fear. And so we don't need a government to shut down speech if it's already inside us, if the censor has taken root in your own brain.
But it's tyranny of the mob. Federalist Papers. Oh, you guys thought I was... It's the only thing I know because I did a show on the Constitution. All right, now we're going to go to the question portion of the subject. I had to get there. Tom basically pushed me there at this point. Tom's the English guy. Look, folks, We're going to take about, what's that? We're going to take 5 questions. Why did I come up with, what? No, 5. We'll see how they go. Maybe there'll be more. Don't look. I have a schedule, important schedule, big business. Who's in charge of the questions back there? Steve, is somebody? Do we?
Raise their hands. Raise their hands.
All right, but I can't. All right, you. Yeah. State your name and your question. Oh, they're gonna give you a mic. Hold on, Rachel.
Hello. Oh, wow.
Oh.
Wow.
Hi,
So,
Rachel.
Just 10 to 15 seconds ago, you guys were talking about a chilling of speech.
Yes.
I think it's a little disheartening. What I see as an increase in empathy and understanding towards people who are different from you, it's a little sad that you guys view that as a chilling of free speech.
That's not a question. That's a statement. Listen to me.
So, I'm going to ask you, do you really think that there's
I
a
thought you were
chilling
going to
of
say,
free
don't you think
speech?
it's sad? I mean, I personally, as a comedian, do think there is there's a big chilling of speech, and our whole thing is to be nasty and hurt people. So, it's a different situation. Comedy, somebody has to get hurt. That's how it works. But thank you. Thank you for your public shaming. Now look, no, I'm kidding. All right, who else has a question? Don't play games. This guy? You? Yes, sir. You may need a mic, too. Here he comes. Steve, right behind you.
I think this is more directed towards David. You had said that my name's Richard.
Hi, Richard.
You had said that the United States should, we have to exert our influence overseas. When the United States in the past has upended the Iranian government, who we constantly call our enemy, the media fails to cover why Iran has become our enemy. When we upend a government like Iraq, how can we, in good conscience, go over and exert more influence in the Mideast?
Well, let me, and I say this with all due respect, take issue with everything you said. In the first instance, I didn't say we should go and impose our will on the world. I said we had the ability to if we wanted to. Secondly, I don't think we should do a lot of the things we've done in the past. And frankly, I think if you're looking for a metric that speaks to the strength of the United States, one of them is the margin of error we have because of our economic and political and other kinds of strength. We can actually go and conduct a really stupid, in fact, evil war in a place like Iraq. We can actually lose in those wars and still remain the most powerful country in the world. But we should learn from those experiences. And we have not actually yet gotten to the point where we've drawn the right conclusions from those experiences. We've gone from one extreme of over-involvement in those places to another extreme of under-involvement in those places. And hopefully that'll moderate as we go forward. As far as Iran and Iraq and how the media covers it goes, I have an answer for you. www.foreignpolicy.com. Please go to our site. This is what we talk about every single day. And if you want a reason why we make Iran an enemy, they're the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. They're the only country in the region seeking to destabilize the region through the use of the terror organization Hezbollah, through their alliance with Shiites in Iraq, with the Assad regime in Syria, with actors in Yemen and in other places. I'm not saying that we should vilify them. I'm not saying we should go to war against them. I'm saying we should recognize them for what they are and try to find a way that working with allies, we can counterbalance them and try not to be the puppet masters in the Middle East, but advance our interests in the Middle East in a reasonable way. We've gone from one president who tried to do it by being too hands-on to another president who said, we're going to leave it to them, and all of a sudden you have refugees streaming into Europe, and we discover we can't do that without losing our own interests. So we've got to find a better path that requires an informed discourse. There's a lot of writing on that informed discourse out there if you want to go and find it, and I think it will lead us to more informed decisions.
Okay. How about, you?
I've got the microphone. I'd like to pick up a thread. I'd like to pick up a thread that was dropped.
Fucking rap battle all of a sudden.
It's Alexander Haig, my God.
I'd like to pick up a thread that was dropped during the debate. Tom, please explain specifically what Citizens United was about. And then I'd like the people who said it was indefensible to defend it,
Right.
to defend the opposition to it.
So, and I would say it's one of the finest, most accessible opinions of the recent courts. Anthony Kennedy, the Supreme Court Justice, wrote the report, Justice Kennedy, and it talks about 60 days before an election that private organizations, corporations, whatever, unions, should not, the previous law was that they should not be able to produce campaign material that would specifically endorse a candidate or attack a candidate, as far as I understand, pretty much correct on that. The problem I would say with that is that it allows the media to find, however you wish, but the media in terms of newspapers.
Which candidate was involved?
Hillary Clinton was the target of a video criticizing her, and I would say that in our society, I think the real problem with Citizens United, and why I think it says bad things about the state of contemporary liberalism, is that it requires inherently the notion that the American people are too stupid to judge the source of the speech. That you can scrutinize speech in this country. The media will do it, but you can do it. And if you don't care enough to do it, you are relinquishing that democratic power that you are vested with. And I would also say the notion of money in politics. Why isn't Hillary Clinton being coronated the nominee? Bernie Sanders is not the man of money, but he is doing pretty well. Donald Trump, as much as he is a man of money, somewhat, although my brother was telling me he could have invested in the stock market and done much better. Anyway, the fact is, he did not raise. Jeb Bush raised about $180 million, and I mean, well, we know what happened. I mean, we have to have more trust in maximal speech, I think.
I got one here.
Oh, go ahead.
The point is well taken that problems in the country can be compared to problems in the body, but some sicknesses are, of course, terminal and can kill you. And I'm wondering, what do the panelists see as the future for people who make their living working with their hands, and what is the effect of immigration, low-skilled immigration, on the wages of those jobs that those people have no choice but to do?
Well, panelists.
Well, look, I mean, manufacturing jobs are on the decline, not because we're exporting those jobs overseas, but because those jobs are being exported to the past. We're moving into an economy where there is greater productivity, and it's changing how people are going to earn a living. That's not necessarily a bad thing. At the end of the 19th century, 95% or so of Americans worked on farms, and 5% of Americans worked on factories. At the end of the 20th century, it was the reverse. At the end of the 19th century, most people worked 7 days a week. Now they work 5 days a week. I think one of the interesting things that's going to happen, and I encourage you to read some of the books on the changes that are taking place, like Race Against the Machine or The Second Machine Age by Andy McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson at MIT, is that in this hyper-productive economy, people will probably actually work fewer and fewer days as in the past. One thing I find interesting about that, by the way, is I go out and I mention this in speeches and people go, oh my God, that's terrible, because we get our identity from our work. And I go, you actually believe that bullshit? This stuff has been handed to you by your employer. No, you get your identity from the work. Go back to that lathe. You get your identity from your life. What if you have more time with your family, or more time to paint, or more time to go and study or learn something else? And that's what's going to happen.
But if you don't have a job,
excuse me.
Okay.
We are going through a period
I need
of
the answer.
transition. And I believe that the central issue in this campaign needs to be, how are we going to create jobs during that period of transition, and not to simply throw up our hands and say, no, we want to hold on to the jobs of the mid-20th century. We need to be focusing on what are the jobs that we're going to want to have in the 21st century. That's a legitimate debate, and a lot of the other things that we've been talking about are not.
You're right that dignity doesn't come from work alone, but without work, and if you need and want work, there is no dignity. If you're an $8 an hour store greeter at Walmart, it's pretty hard to have a sense of worth in your work. We're going through this agonizing and epical change, and what we're talking about here really the whole evening is globalization and all the effects of it. If we don't have institutions, starting with government, but no one has mentioned labor unions. I would say labor unions are a key institution that have dropped almost to zero. And without them, workers do not have a voice to organize themselves to make sure that in that agonizing change, they benefit. It's not all corporate profits. Right now, corporate profits in the last few years have been incredibly high, while wages are stagnant. Why is that? Well, it has to be something to do with the fact that institutions like government and unions are so weak that they have not been able to right the balance. The magic of the market by itself is not going to do it, David. We need institutions, and those institutions have to have some strength, and right now they're weak. And until they're stronger, we can have all the startups in the world, and we're still not going to have a fair economy.
You're absolutely right, but there's one thing I'd like to add to that, because the question of immigration came up. There are 11.4 million people last year applied for 50,000 lottery visas in the United States. There is huge demand to get into the U.S., and the 1.3 million people who came to the United States legally in the past year and come here legally each year bring a huge amount of value to the United States. New Yorkers, better than anybody else, has to understand that immigration is one of the great strengths of the United States, contrary to what the Republican nominee or likely nominee is saying, and that in fact, it is one of the reasons that alone among the big countries of the developed world, the United States has a growing population, a growing young population, and a growing educated population. And so the influx of immigrants to the United States is something that we and our leaders ought to be embracing.
Let's
And
let
just
Kristin speak. We're coming off sexist.
Yeah, I'm very offended right now. No, but just to keep going with what David said about the immigration stuff, we have this idea that, oh, immigrants take all of these low-skilled jobs. Well, yeah, but second-generation immigrants, the children of both illegal and legal immigrants, actually graduate from college at a higher rate than, native citizens who are not from immigrant families. So immigrants contribute a lot to our economy. My dad's fiance, she owns a restaurant, and she employs a lot of immigrants, and she says that these folks will do the jobs that a lot of Americans simply won't do, and they'll do it for less, and they are so thankful to be here in this country. They raise their kids with good values. Their kids believe in hard work, and like I said, the kids go on to graduate from college at higher rates than non-immigrant children, and they are really part of the future of this country, and they're contributing a lot. So I don't think that that's a negative thing at all.
No, but how many people want to see a picture of her dad's fiance? I'm dying to at this point. I know. It's like, it's nothing to me. Hold on, sir. Please don't yell. Jesus. All right, fine. Very official. Go ahead. Yeah, you back there.
David, you mentioned before the Chinese make
What's your name, sir?
George.
Whoa.
Chinese make 7,000 a year, and in America will make 50,000 a year. Who in this room could survive in New York City at 50,000 a year? GDP per capita.
I don't know what the ticket price is to this. There's nobody in this room who could do that. That's for sure. But, it could look.
It's the people, the small business that raise the money to hire people to feed this economy, and the left wing, Sanders, and the Democratic parties are not funding the businesses that are feeding America today and creating jobs. End of story. I am one of those people that started with my hands with tools, and I built my own business from that. Okay, and that was during the Reagan era. Today, there's no help for that. I see these kids coming out of college, they're spending $200,000-300,000 a year for colleges, and they can't even get a job today.
So let's, during the closing statements, everybody can address the unions and small business thing. You know what I mean? Because, or not. But either way, it's some of the closing statements, folks.
Can I make a rather ridiculous request? I had one too many sellers. May I take a 1-minute bathroom break?
Sure.
And people can continue. I apologize.
Why can't they have the closing statements? You don't have to hear other people.
And
Don't worry
he's
about
under 30, my God. I mean,
it. What? All right, I'll take one more question while he pees. All right.
Hi,
I
I've
don't
got
give a
the
shit.
mic.
A lot. Oh, go ahead.
Over here.
Go
Over
ahead.
here.
Yeah, go ahead.
She's over here.
Hi.
She's over there.
It's my question.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Watch it.
I know. The way she rocked the house, walked over.
Well, I want to say thank you to George for bringing up a word that was important to me, and that is globalization. It's an interesting debate, but I'm finding maybe we're asking the wrong question, actually, instead of us versus them or why. Isn't the question, what could we be learning from other countries? And I want to go to something that Kristin said. I guess this is my question here. You talked about the boy in the Midwest, but you also talked about a woman in Dubai, right? And I believe that you said that that woman would leave Dubai and not be allowed to drive, and you said quite a few other things. I've been to Dubai, and I know women in Dubai, and actually, the Emirati women are leading the way. There is so much that we can learn.
Well, when you leave Dubai.
No heckling.
Right.
She was referring to Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Yeah, when you leave the city
All
of
right, but-
Dubai, it's much different than Dubai.
Excuse me. You know what? I think we should listen to this woman.
Thank
She's
you.
making an
Go
important
ahead.
point.
So my point actually is, from what I have learned, and I am not a reporter at all, I'm a musician, but I've taken an interest in this, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from the UAE. They have a minister of tolerance. They have a minister of happiness. They have a minister of youth. So my question to you, as someone who is up on that platform, who has a responsibility to her readers, and who spoke of checking your facts, why didn't you check your facts on this one?
Well, clearly clearly I meant when you leave Dubai, women do not have the same rights as men. Dubai is, yes, a very industrialized city. It's very much more modern than the rest of the Middle East. But in the rest of the Middle East, women do not have the same rights as men. We are so lucky to live. I mean, for us sitting here, it's very easy to say something like that. But in the Middle East, women do not have the same rights as men. We are so lucky to be living in a place where we do.
Finish. What? Listen.
It's just not true.
Listen. See what happens when you go to the bathroom?
No, but look. Let me say something about this, despite the fact that it will suggest a rift here. No, 90% of the women who go to school in the Emirates as a country graduate, 70% of the university graduates are women across the country. There are more women in the Emirati cabinet than there are in the U.S. cabinet. The head of their space program is a woman. The head of the program, the fighter pilots that flew in and bombed Syria is a woman. The Minister of Tolerance that was mentioned is a woman, and so on and so forth. It's very fine to say there's some countries in the Middle East where this is not the case. The Emirates was the wrong country to pick.
The vast majority, though, there is a clear, distinct problem with and I don't think it's Islam, but a rod in political Islam in terms of treatment of women, and it's inherent. And the idea as well, you hear a lot about the notion that women in Iran are treated well. That is simple bullshit.
I would also add that if you're a foreign worker in the Emirates,
Yeah, exactly.
does the Ministry of Tolerance have a whole lot to say to you?
Yes, let's face it.
Where are the passports?
We've established the Middle East is not wealthy. Now listen, I deserve more. All right, look, I'm wrapping it up. I don't care what anyone here says.
Anybody here knows what Wellesley is?
Why not? They should know. If this crowd doesn't know, nobody does. All right, let's wrap it up. Oh yeah, I'm wrapping it up. You can stab me if you don't like it. Who'd like to start? Well, we'll go in reverse order that we went last time. Hold on. Okay. Mr. Rogan.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think the notion that this country is great is proved by the measure of the debate and the enjoyment of the audience and the diversity of the audience. But I do think we're in decline for the reasons that I mentioned, both in terms of, and an area I didn't focus on enough, frankly, is the very deliberate movement of wealth and opportunity away from the youngest in our society to the oldest. And I would say two key examples there. Failure to reform entitlements, which will bankrupt the nation. How does that affect people? Well, at a basic level, poor people, when interest rates start skyrocketing because our debt is not reliable, that's going to make it much harder for poor people to access capital and rise up the social ladder. As a second point, Obamacare. Any young person in this country, and Republicans deserve a lot of criticism for pretending that our healthcare system didn't need reform. It did and it does. But Obamacare steals from the young to pay for the old in a way that is not equitable. And so, look, the country is in a position of disrepair and decline, mostly and most definingly by our interactions with each other and our sense of confidence in the future of the country. And that matters because the notion of American optimism, going back to, again, we talk about the 60s, the best example of government, the moon landings, that aspiration, that confidence, that is not there. And I think people would say it's not there, but it can be. And hopefully this panel in some small way with my bathroom break, Colin, has gone in a position of remedy.
Thank you. Miss Tate.
So I think when we talk about is the country in decline, we need to look at big picture. We need to look at a long time span. So yeah, there are problems in the country in the last couple of years. We're not perfect, but 20 years ago, we were worse off than we are now. And in 20 years from now, we'll be better off than we are now. We are always, in a big picture way, progressing. Our quality of lives are getting better. If an American is a hard worker, generally speaking, they can do what they want. They can achieve their dreams. There's no reasonable dream that a hardworking American really can't accomplish today. If you want to go to Fiji, you work hard, you save up for that vacation, you go to Fiji. If you want to drive around in a sports car for a couple hours, you can save up and you can do that. There are going to be people inevitably that fail in a society. That's true of any society. But generally, we are a country of dreams. We're a country where you can reinvent yourself constantly. You can fail. That's part of the beauty of America. You can fail, you get up, you try again, you fail again, you get up again, and you try again. That is America, and that's what makes this country great. And the quality of all of our lives, the fact that we're all sitting here today, the fact that there are people in Iowa watching this debate today, in California, that shows that we are not in decline. We have a great quality of life here in America, and nobody in this room would want to be born anywhere else today.
All right. Mr. Packer.
Yes, yes. So a couple of years ago, I published a book called The Unwinding, which was not about the glorious state of the country. And to write it, I spent a lot of time in sort of the forgotten parts of the country and talked to people in small towns where the main street was boarded up. And what I heard in these places, and they're not Seattle, they're not Boston, they're not Boulder, Colorado, they are the kinds of places I spoke of earlier that used to be called the Heartland, the Heart. I heard three things. One, the game is rigged. In other words, the rich will do well, the powerful, the connected will do well because they have the connections. Two, there's no more middle class here. It's all gone to the extremes. And three, my children will not do as well as I did. So those three things together are a kind of indictment of the American dream. If without those three things, what is the American dream? We always imagine the heroic individual riding to the rescue. And lately it's been Mark Zuckerberg or the late Steve Jobs or whoever. But it's a bit of an illusion because really it's been collective effort, led by individuals, but always supported by healthy institutions. The civil rights movement was a grassroots, church-based movement that used labor, government, and business to achieve the legislative success that it did. We no longer have those institutions. We have little boomlets of reform. We have campaign finance over here. We have the $15 minimum wage over there. To me, these are encouraging things. None of the people I interviewed for my book were unpatriotic. They were all deep patriots, and I am too. I love this country, and that's why it distresses me that we no longer see each other. Whole parts of the country write each other off, whether politically, economically, culturally, or otherwise, without a strong democratic institution to channel the energy and the hopes and the intelligence of the people. It will continue to stagnate as it has. So I keep coming back to that word institution. It's boring, but it's essential.
Thank you. And Mr. Ropkopf.
Thank you. I want to say three things. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you to the organizers for a great event. It is a great country when you get so many people to spend 40 or 50 bucks to watch what they could watch for free on CNN. Although, having said that, it's better with alcohol and it's better and more appropriate with the moderator who's a comedian. Secondly, I do want you all, as you evaluate where you come down on this, to remember that George began as the foundation of his argument by quoting me. And therefore, I hope that you can see that I'm squarely on both sides of these issues. I found George's summation to be extremely moving, and I'll be shifting to the other table in a second. I guess the only real distinction between where George sits and I sit on this issue is that I actually believe that we have within the DNA of the country the wherewithal to address the problems we're facing and to continue to reinvent ourselves and to continue to rise up and to be a great 21st century power while recognizing that that is quite different from the 20th century power will be, and that's going to require a kind of creativity. But the final point that I want to make is that the very articulate woman who stood up earlier as a musician, and you noticed her standing up, and she's beautiful and articulate, is the woman I live with. I'm from New Jersey, and I live with her, and so this has got to be the greatest country in the world.
Nice. Well, folks, we hope we resolved some of your qualms about where the country's going, and just know one thing. I have Irish citizenship, so it doesn't matter to me. I'll bail in 2 seconds unless I start getting the respect I deserve. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists.